Good old Rachel Zegler. You know, the internet is never a place where you're pretty much safe from this person, unfortunately, because Rachel Zegler has been the new Brie Larson, I think, for Disney, and Rachel Zegler has been the face of hate for a lot of people. Nobody really likes this woman at all. Everybody loves to hate on her, and for good reason. Rachel Zegler, unfortunately for her, can't really hold back her narcissism. Her narcissism has such high levels that really it's uncontrollable. She even admits this in multiple different interviews. Now, why are we talking about Rachel Zegler? Well, everybody's talking about the latest Snow White because nobody's really sure if the latest Snow White is even going to be a thing at this point, considering how much it's been delayed, considering all the bad press around it. But I do think that Disney is definitely way too far in on this movie, and they're not going to cancel it. They're not going to stop it. They're going to release it. But apparently, the budget has finally been revealed about the latest Snow White, and it is insane how much money the budget is for this movie. It's incredible, guys. So let's get into this article from Bounding Into Comics. But of course, before we do, guys, just consider subscribing if you're new here. I'm Shadow Ban as hell, and like the video to push us out into the YouTube algorithm. The article says initial costs for Rachel Zegler's Snow White film are already shockingly high. A new report details that the initial cost for the Walt Disney Company's live-action Snow White film starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot came in at $209.3 million. Ladies and gentlemen, holy Christ, $209 million for Snow White. I mean, you got to imagine, if you guys remember those initial pictures from the set, right? The ones that they tried to deny. It is insane how much money this movie costs, considering just how bad the movie actually looks. Those pictures that came out looked so bad that Disney actually tried to deny that it was even from the set to begin with. Eventually, they had to come out and admit that it was from the set and it was from people who were taking part in the movie. So all those terrible costumes that we saw, all those terrible locations that we saw, everything that we saw from those pictures really goes to show, and you have to ask yourself, where is this money going? You know what I mean? After a certain point, you kind of have to admit that there has to be some sort of money laundering going on here. Like, there is no way this movie is $209 million. And I guarantee you, it is underreported. I would promise you that these budgets are underreported to make themselves look better in the public eye. There is no way in hell they spent this much money. And if they did, I guarantee you they spent more, because they're not going to want to admit that they're spending $250+ million on a movie like Snow White with Rachel Zegler. So it says the new report came from Caroline Reed at Forbes, reveals that Snow White production went under the codename Hidden Heart Productions Limited in the United Kingdom. According to Reed, in the UK filings for the company, the Walt Disney Company had already spent $209.3 million as of July 31st, 2022. However, she notes that the United Kingdom's government has granted Disney a $41.1 million tax rebate, meaning the net spend so far is at $168.2 million. The key thing to point out here is that these are just the costs throughout July 31st, 2022, and do not include any production costs incurred after that date. Ford rightfully notes its costs are likely to rise sharply as more than a year of post-production still had to be done after the date of the financial statements. It's not just post-production that will increase the cost, though. We know from earlier this year they were also doing pickup shots without Rachel Zegler. It's likely these production costs and any more they might have done in the past year will also be included. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot more to do with this movie after the date of those financial statements, and it really shouldn't shock anybody. And as I said earlier in the video, this number is going to go up. There's no way in hell it's going to stay at $209 million. It is going to go in the 200 to 300 million range, 250 I should say, to $300 million range. That's where I see the budget for this movie landing, probably 275 if you want to be fair. Now you're going to take that budget, you got to remember that's not accounting for marketing, you know. So it's insane the amount of money that Disney is spending. And it's weird because Bob Iger specifically came out and said that they need to spend less money on their budgets. They need to have less money in their budgets so that they can produce more quality films over time and learn how to produce good films with lower budgets again. But it seems like he's not taking his own advice. I mean, the amount of money that they're spending on the Marvels, for example, is insane. 270 some odd million dollars, guaranteed that's underreported. It's going to be well over 300 million by the time everything is said and done, and that's not even including marketing. This movie is another example. 210 million. It's not even including the latest year of post-production. It's not even including marketing. This movie is going to have to make 7 to 800 million dollars probably to break even when you account for the cut from the movie theaters when they take 50% of the money. And that's another thing people forget too. Movie theaters are there to make money. They're making money on this stuff, so they need to take their cut. You have a lot of these media websites falsely reporting on the fact that, oh, a movie with a $300 million budget made $350 million at the box office, so it profited $50 million. Congratulations. No, that's not true. That is not true at all. That is literally purposefully lying to people and trying to get clicks to make it look like the movie's doing better than it actually is. For a $300 million movie to break even, it needs to do around roughly $600 million to break even. People tend to either forget that or they willfully ignore it when they're reporting, which is what a lot of these media websites do. So when it comes to something like Snow White, do you really think, let's say it stays at 209 million, which it's not, but let's say that it did. That means that it needs to do around $420 million to break even just on the budget, not even including marketing, which for this movie, they're going to ramp up the marketing big time on Snow White, guaranteed. So again, why is it that they falsely report this stuff? It's because it's to make these movies look better. They don't want people to actually know the truth about just how bad these movies are doing. It says, reacting to this information, financial and box office analyst Valiant Renegade wrote on X, Rachel Zegler's Snow White looks like it will have a production cost of $300 million. It's quite possible it could go even higher than $300 million, given the production costs that were incurred over the past year, as well as any kind of post-production work the film will undergo. Nevertheless, Reed claims, based on these initial numbers, the film would need to gross $336 million to break even. However, her calculation does not factor in marketing costs. She explains that studios typically receive 55% of box office grosses from domestic theaters and 43% of grosses from international markets. Thus, she explains, taking the average of 43% and 55% gives roughly a 50-50 split of the box office between theaters and studios. Well, at least somebody's finally admitting that. It's weird, man. You see so many people talking about this stuff, and they never want to talk about the most important part right here, the fact that they don't get all the money from the ticket sales, because people actually believe that they get 100% of the money. Like, you have idiots out there that will argue against you, right? Like, you have the people with Little Mermaid that were arguing, oh, the movie made money, look, it did 100 million over its budget, it was amazing. No, that's not how this works, ladies and gentlemen. Like, and it's weird, man. People really just don't want to talk about that fact. It says, she then concludes, if Disney retains around 50% of the takings from Snow White, the movie will need to gross $336 million just to cover its baseline spending of $168.2 million. However, as noted above, given there are clearly quite a bit of production costs that are likely to still come in, as well as post-production and marketing, one could see the film needing to bring in at least $750 million at the box office, and that's using a conservative 2.5x factor for Valiant Renegade's $300 million minimum production. The 2.5x factor accounts for different grosses as well as marketing costs. Given the massive budget, it's unlikely the film will recoup its costs. The most recent live-action film, The Little Mermaid, only grossed $569 million this year. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, Little Mermaid was such a massive flop, and rightfully so. I mean, they really thought that they can take that IP and run with identity politics all the way to the bank, and they realized very quickly that that was not the case. And like all these other movies, Little Mermaid, right? Peter Pan, all these movies, they're like a fart in the wind, right? People were talking about it as it was going to be the greatest thing in the world. It's so amazing for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then what happened? The movie came out, and 2 to 4 weeks later, nobody's talking about it. Months later, it's not even mentioned. Nobody cares. It literally came and went, and it's not sticking around like the classics did because it's nowhere near as good as the classics. So ultimately, at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, these budgets are absolutely insane. Rachel Zegler really is going to affect this movie. I can't wait to see what the final numbers are. I would be curious to see if it surpasses Little Mermaid, but time will tell. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, consider leaving me a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment, let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Hypnotic out.